Superheroes have always been a huge part of my life. The first Iron Man movie came out when I was 5 years old, so I haven't really lived a life outside of them being a pop culture commodity, you know? But even then, before, not just superheroes, just powered individuals in general, fantastical or scientific or otherwise, have always held my attention. One of my earliest memories is me and my brother me and my brother going into the room when the rest of our family was watching a football game, and we were reading a Norse mythology picture book and seeing images of Thor flying through the air with this hammer that could summon lightning and taking down giants. Or the books I would read as a kid, Percy Jackson, all the Rick Riordan books, honestly. This kid who could ADHD just like me and could summon water and control it, a beautiful swordsman, men with goats for legs, rocks that grew sentient and grew to huge heights. All these things, all these different stories you could only tell with these kind of characters. It wouldn't work with just a normal person in their day-to-day life. They had to be able to take that punishment, to rise up to a challenge no one else could. And you look at these stories and you think that they're the stories behind these heroes, behind these paragons of virtue, or some not so much, and you think they have to be just as compelling as the concept, right? I mean, a man that can shrug off bullets, a person that can be from one side of the earth to the other in a matter of seconds. How could a story like that not be unique and interesting? But you look at the MCU, and people will criticize it nowadays, saying it's lost it. But honestly, that was something they lost pretty quickly, I think. And I think, personally, the best, or one of the best, examples to really dive into that and really show where they, in some ways, do manage to tell a story you could only tell with a hero, and only a specific hero at that, and ways that they fail at this, I feel, is one of my favorite MCU movies, which is Ant-Man, the original Ant-Man. So I'm gonna first talk about the things I think the movie did well, or more so the ideas that the movie presented that it could have, should be things to be replicated from Ant-Man. And then I will get into my normal ranting self about the things that I didn't like, and I will probably lose my temper for that. So without further ado, this is Hugo Rants, Ant-Man. The first thing I want to talk about is this concept that your hero determines your story. This is true whether it is fiction or non-fiction. Non-fiction is kind of obvious because it was a true thing. Your story should not be able to exist in the way it exists without the hero that you have placed into it. And what I don't mean by this, and what shouldn't be taken as the meaning of this, is that this story's conflict can only be resolved by your character in these fictionalized superhero and fantastical stories. That is very often the case. This is the only person in the world that could handle this threat, and that's fine, that's cool, that helps a lot, but that's not necessarily the problem. Ant-Man does this well. And what do I mean by this? So you might be thinking, well, it's not like a super high-powered enemy, right? Like Darren Cross is just some crazy rich guy with a suit that lets him shrink. I'm sure even in this story, I'm sure Thor would have a way easier time with this villain. Iron Man, Hulk, even Captain America could do it, right? And he's not as drastically overpowered as some of these other heroes. And that's true, I completely agree. But the thing is, that would be an incredibly different story. The story that you get right now is of a man that wants to be a father. A man that doesn't want to be a hero. A man that doesn't want to be a thief. You get a story about parenthood, about what it means to be a parent. And these are things you could only tell with the characters in this story. Scott being an ex-con recently out of prison, I forget the word, divorced from his wife, wanting a connection with his daughter. He's been in for a couple years. I don't remember the exact number, but he's been in for a bit, right? He just wants to be a father. He doesn't want to go back into the gang. He ignores the proposal Luis gives him to begin with because that's not the life he wants anymore. But he eventually does it because he needs the money for child support because he wants to see his daughter. He wants visitation rights. And you look at Hank. A large part of this story focuses around Hope's relation to Hank, and to a slightly smaller degree, Darren's relation to Hank. And I feel like this could have been capitalized on more, but I'll get into that later. Before everything else, this is a heist movie about family. And this is a story you could not tell with Thor. Thor doesn't want to be a father. Thor has a good relationship with his family aside from Loki. And he kind of doesn't have a good relationship with his family, but that's not the main focus of Thor, or Iron Man, or Captain America. These characters have their own focuses, the idea of what does it mean to be loyal to your country? Can you fix problems that defined you in your past? And what does it mean to be born a king? These are characters that, while all good, have very different stories in line for their characters and for their power sets. So we look at Scott, right? Who is Scott? Scott is an amazing thief, above all else. He can fight, that is true. He's actually not even bad at it, but that is not the skill set he brings to this movie or the reason why he is chosen to be Ant-Man. What does he do? He went to jail for stealing from people that no one believed could be stole from. That's his whole thing. He breaks into this house. He uses the liquid nitrogen to expand the water behind the metal door to get in. Something no one else would have thought of. Hell, he impresses Hank with it. This is something that no other superhero that we've met so far in this world, in this movie, in this universe could have done. Could they have gotten into that room? Sure, a lot of them could have. Could they have done it in the way he did? No. Would they have stolen? Would they have come in as a heist? No, they wouldn't have. Which is very important for the story. What is the conflict? Is that they need to steal this suit from Darren Cross. Scott is good for that. This is good. This is a story you could not tell without Ant-Man. You could not tell without Scott. So Scott's a good thief, right? And look at the other characters, right? Hope. Hope is an amazing fighter. She has a very close relationship with the villain. She's very important in the mechanical running of this story and the emotional side of it. She has a very personal relationship with Hank. She has a very strained relationship to begin with Scott. The fact that she isn't a thief, she isn't Scott. Hell, they bring up this idea that the only reason Scott is hired, well, partially he is hired because he's an amazing thief. I don't think the movie's trying to say that's not the case. But the reason he is chosen instead of Hope doing it is that he is, quote, expendable, as he words it. Hank is worried about losing Hope, but he's not worried about losing Scott. I don't know, I'm iffy about that story choice, because on one hand, that is a very interesting dramatic thread that I feel like they didn't really lean on too much. I mean, it's kind of sad, so you kind of keep it in the back of your head for the entire movie, but it's not something they really hone in on, I feel, as much as they probably should have. And also, they don't put as much emphasis as I feel like they should on just how good of a thief Scott is. And to be fair, that is Scott saying he's expendable. That is not like, I mean, it is the movie, but it's not like Hank or Hope saying that. That is Scott. That is how he feels about this situation. So, you know what? Fair enough. But it's just like the scenes in this movie that focus on this being a movie that could only be done the way Scott is, or with Ant-Man, a man that can shrink. That is very important to this movie. There are scenes that you could not do without it. For example, the first scene where Scott puts on the suit in the bathtub and shrinks is an amazing scene. That scene, one, has amazing visual effects. The pacing is wild. It's a wild ride non-stop, and it's very funny. The scene with like the bathtub, you see the water coming at him. You see like when he's in the mosh pit, right? And like the fucking glass heel. Lots of moments of comedy, the mouse, the vacuum cleaner. This is a scene you couldn't do outside of an Ant-Man movie. Him breaking out of the jail, riding the ant to get out. Like, this scene is very fun. And not even just the scenes when they're small. The fight between Darren and Scott at the end of the movie, or Yellow Jacket and Ant-Man, in case people who haven't watched the movie in a while. Darren Cross is the Yellow Jacket, the crazy guy. Just in case. I feel like I should have said this earlier in the video, but you know what? Whatever. The fight they have when they're in the suitcase and there's the fucking song playing, or especially when they're in Cass's room, the train, throwing the train at him. All these scenes that you could only do with people that could shrink. It's very entertaining. It's sick. The fact that, like, I came here to watch Ant-Man, and that's what I'm watching. This isn't just Iron Man with a different suit. This isn't just Spider-Man with a different sense of humor. This is a completely unique guy. So I decided while recording this video, I'm going to do it a little different. Instead of just having it, I am going to mostly be getting into the negatives now, but I am saving some of the positives to bring back up in this negative section. So what are the things in this movie that really shouldn't be copied? Well, for one, a common critique for the MCU is their villains, and unfortunately, Ant-Man falls into the same trap. Darren Cross, aka the Yellow Jacket, a brilliant scientist that at a young age was taken in as the protege to the great Hank Pym. He became obsessed with the stories, the legends of the Ant-Man, and quickly put together that Hank was him and that he was real. He wanted to replicate this. He wanted to create the Pym particle. But Hank would not indulge because he wanted to keep the past past. The person he was, the tragedy that that particle makes him think of, does not want to relive it, does not want it in present day. Darren grows up to run Pym Industries, naming it Cross Industries, and works on making a new version of the Pym particle. He finally gets it to work. He puts it in his suit, but he did not know that without a special protective helmet, the suit would mess up your neural pathways, and he became more unhinged than he already was. He then tries to kill them all, including Hank, including Scott, who's the only one that can stop him. Now, there's more issues to Darren than just he is a villain with the same powers as the hero, because believe it or not, same v same is not inherently bad. It can be very fucking cool, right? The issue is when it is not thematically important and or relevant, and this goes for the villain themselves. I'm going to give you 2 examples of how same v same can be extremely interesting. The first one is where these movies are inevitably ripping off is Iron Man 1. In Iron Man 1, Tony Stark starts the movie as a war profiteer. He makes weapons, sells them because he thinks they're cool, right? He's like, ooh, a fire missile, right? And he doesn't even bother to think that these are killing people, that these are hurting people, but he's making wild money off of it. He starts the movie as billionaire playboy philanthropist. Genius billionaire playboy philanthropist. My bad. He's a chronic womanizer in the comics. He's an alcoholic. This isn't as explored as much in the first Iron Man movie, a bit more in the second. But he doesn't start off as a great person. Is he evil? No, by no means, I'd say at least. But he is participating in very bad things. It takes a missile blowing up in his face and being kidnapped with an innocent man that he learns, shit, what I'm doing has consequences. So he turns away from that. He comes back. He disbands his very lucrative war weapons business. And his partner, and hell, almost his uncle for the longest time, Obadiah Stane, resents him for it. Because they were in this together. Get no thing wrong. Obadiah Stane and Tony Stark were great friends, family even at the start of the movie. But they get pushed apart because the main thing of that movie is Tony wants to change. Obadiah doesn't. That is why at the end of the movie when the warmonger, or I'm sorry, the ironmonger that Obadiah Stane is piloting is a crude imitation of what the Iron Man suit is. It's a bigger, scarier version of the Mark 1 that he made in the cave, right? With a box of scraps. I had to do the quote. They're the same because Obadiah isn't just a villain with the same powers as Iron Man. He's someone who represents who Tony used to be, right? That is why it is the same power. So when they're fighting each other, it isn't just a cool fight scene, right? It is. It has very fun choreography, but it is Tony proving that he can change. He is not that person anymore, right? That is why they have the same powers. Obadiah is the Ironmonger, more specifically, is a representation of what the Iron Man suit could be if he wanted to make it a weapon again. Big, scary, clunking, unthinking, right? But the Iron Man suit is an inspirational ideal of what Iron Man can be. A shining metal man that flies through the air eloquently, and protects people that could not protect themselves. And this second example, number 2, that I really want to get into is I have been watching the Defenders series, or the Street Level MCU's Netflix series right now. And when I'm done with all of them, I'm going to make a video about those too, so stay tuned for that. But one of my favorites so far has been Luke Cage. I've watched season 1. I've already watched both seasons of Luke Cage a while ago, but I'm rewatching all of the series in order because it does make a lot more sense if you watch it in order. But in Luke Cage season 1, Luke Cage fights 2 villains, right? At the beginning of the series, he fights Cottonmouth, a mob boss of sorts a crime boss more specifically. He's not really a part of the mob. A crime boss located in Harlem who runs Harlem's Paradise, a very important and popular club. And this villain is very interesting. Mariah, his cousin, who is a corrupt politician on the Harlem scene, are both very interesting villains, and she stays as a villain, but she kills Cottonmouth. And the villain that comes next is more important to this conversation specifically, but Cottonmouth is a very interesting villain, let me tell you, and he also doesn't have powers, so he's not really same v same. They're having a different fight, which Luke is kind of won at the end of that. But basically, there's this man named Diamondback, who we later learn is Luke's half-brother. Specifically, he was born as a bastard from Luke's father with a different woman, and Luke's father never acknowledged him as his son, even though they were raised together almost as siblings, best friends from a young age. And Diamondback hates Luke, because Luke was seen as a miracle child. His mother had been barren for years, and then suddenly she was birthing him, right? He was a gift from God, the miracle child. And Diamondback despised him for it. So they grow up, and Diamondback invests in these bullets to kill Luke Cage, because Luke Cage has a very interesting power set, which I will get into more in this Defenders video. But he's completely bulletproof, among other things. So these are special bullets that can hurt him. That's how much Diamondback hates him, and they don't have it in his final fight. In this final fight they have, Diamondback has made a suit that copies Luke's powers. And they're fighting on the street. There's no music, but there's a crowd of Harlem citizens standing around. And it feels very reminiscent to Family Dispute you'd see on the street late at night walking down. They're fighting each other. There's this ring. They're cheering each other on. They're like, ooh, ah, kind of thing, right? No music. Very down to earth for a large majority of it. And Diamondback having the same powers as Luke is very important here, because I feel, how I read this, right, personally, is that Diamondback wants to be Luke Cage. He wants that affection that was given to him from a young age that he feels he didn't get because he wasn't the miracle child, he was just a bastard. And he wants to be who Luke is, but he can't. That is the fight. And Luke doesn't want to hurt his brother. He tries not to fight him. That's how he wins at the end, is he doesn't fight and he doesn't give in to being the enemy he wants him to be. But Diamondback wants to kill his brother. He wants to defeat the man that's hurt him. And Luke wants... He doesn't want to fight his brother anymore. This is a man that he's loved his whole life. And them having the same powers, both being untouchable to anyone but each other, this is a problem only them as brothers could solve together. However violently. And I also feel this is more like conjecture on my part and not so much I feel is directly said by the movie, but the fact that Luke's powers are him, right? Sure, he was given them through an experiment, but you can't take him away, right? It's his skin that's bulletproof, not a suit he wears. That's a big part of Luke Cage, is that he doesn't wear a suit at all. He doesn't hide his personality. He doesn't hide his face. But once again, I'm not going to get off on that tangent. I'm trying not to get off on unscripted tangents. This is a scripted tangent, don't you worry. But Diamondback's is a suit. It's a charade. He's not this powerful paragon of a man that Luke Cage is. Just wants to be. Those scenes are so good, especially that Luke Cage one. It's so powerful to have them just throw down on each other. It's important that they both had the same powers in that scene and in the Iron Man scene. So let's get back to Ant-Man. Darren and Scott having the same powers has no thematic reference at all. It makes sense for Darren's character. He was obsessed with the Ant-Man story for the entirety of his time spent with Hank Pym. Of course he'd want to copy it and make a suit for it. That makes complete sense, right? But thematically, Darren doesn't mean anything against Scott. Scott's story is about wanting to be a father and learning he can be a hero. He could use his thieving skills not to go back to stealing from people. He can do something only he could do. And Darren's story is about feeling dejected from Hank Pym, or at least for undertones of it. Really, he's a very shallow villain. Like, he just chooses to, there's a scene where he just chooses to test on lambs because they're cuter, I guess, even though I'm sure mice would be less expensive and would lead to the same results. So I don't know, I guess we're just supposed to hate him more for it. And he also kills this guy in a bathroom, which no fucking way he didn't get caught for that. You know what I mean? There's no way this is not a highly secured facility. I'm gonna get off a tangent, I don't fucking care. He walks into there are only 2 people in this fucking bathroom, right? He walks in, the guy that said no to him in a fucking conference meeting, right? He was like, I don't know, this kind of fucking crazy, my guy. I'm not gonna do this. So he goes into the bathroom. Darren's already there. I think he's been in there for a bit because obviously he had to get in after that guy because the guy would have seen him, unless he was like hiding in a stall or some shit, which is a funny image, not gonna lie. But Darren's all like leaned up against the fucking sink. Guy comes out, they have a talk. He shrinks, turns him into goop, and flushes him down the toilet. So these 2 men go into the bathroom. Only 2 men in. One of them comes out before the other one never comes out and he goes missing. Darren's gonna be a fucking suspect, and I get it. He's rich. He could probably get away with it, right? But even still, are you fucking serious? This never comes up? This is something that's like, oh, well, there was no evidence. Oh, I'm really smart. It was fucking goo. Okay, but there's a fucking camera. There's not a camera in the bathroom. Sure. There's a camera pointed at the fucking door, though. Whatever. Off topic. Point is, Darren is not a well-used villain. Now, I don't think the movie would have been better if you just removed Darren, right? In fact, I think Darren could be in a new version of this movie, still in it, and way cooler. I'm not Channel Awesome. I'm not How It Should Have Ended, right? So, I am not going to be rewriting and re-scripting the movie, okay? If anyone likes what I've said in this video and they want to copy what I've said and make a re-script of the video, fucking go for it. I would love to see that done. But here's my idea, is thematically, we want a villain that goes around Scott for Scott, right? So what do we need? We need something you can't just fight. And why is that? Because Scott's theme is of being a thief, not being a hero. That's what he's good at. He's got good parkour skills. He's very intelligent with technology. I believe he says he has a master's in engineering at the beginning of the movie. He's sneaky. He has his band of loyal misfits who are all great at their own different roles for thieving and such, right? So how do we get a villain that works well for this? Now, I would have the main villain of Ant-Man, and hear me out, this will drastically change one movie, but slightly change a movie previous to it. And that would be that the main villain of this movie should, in my idea, and this doesn't specifically have to be this villain, this is just the best choice I've thought of. Once again, I am not as familiar with Ant-Man comics, is MODOK. And that's why I said it could be a drastic change, because MODOK is Darren Cross in Ant-Man Quantumania. But that movie is shit. And MODOK in that movie is shit. And in the comics, they are not the same person. So, in my version of the movie, how it would be is, during Iron Man 3, AIM Labs with the extremist terrorists, there was one survivor in my version. There could have been the scientist that they were working with that was kind of like shady in the background of the movie kind of thing. He wasn't like one of the extremist soldiers. And there could have been an end credit scene in the movie. I forget what the end credit scene to that trash movie is, but have it be him like scraping up research papers, or even better yet, maybe he was an extremist soldier and he got fucked up at the end, right? And then the end credit scene is him like building a chair suit, so he's in the chair during Ant-Man. That makes more sense. Yeah, I like that more. He would be the main villain for this movie. And it would be a very similar idea. Darren is wanting to make the Pym particles. Whole thing. Darren is still in it. He's still running it. But we get this idea that he, like, is working with someone. Like, we get these scenes throughout the movie of him, like, being on a call with someone, or, like, looking at the cameras and, like, getting a worried look kind of thing. And eventually we figure out that AIM is being restarted as a shadow under Cross Industries. Like in the movie, he like sells to Hydra. Don't do that bit. Don't do that bit. Have him be working with AIM, right? Because in the comics, AIM is a consistent and very prevalent threat. And MODOK is a part of AIM, usually. So MODOK would be in the movie, and they'd figure it out about it kinda earlier on, and it's like, oh shit, we have to get in and make sure he cannot get these Pym particles to MODOK, because MODOK would be really dangerous, right? But the Cross Industries is sealed. Like they figure out that maybe there's this headquarters under Cross that they figure out about, right? So they need to do a heist to get in, and that's why Scott's there. You could lean into still that Scott's expendable. This is so fucking dangerous, and Hope is not a thief. Hope is a fighter. Hope's a really fucking good fighter, but she is a fighter. And you get this theme of, and MODOK wouldn't really hold the whole dad theme per se. That theme could still be incorporated with Hank and Hope and Darren, and how Scott kind of fits into that kind of thing. But MODOK is a representation of a villain that you cannot just fight. Like, MODOK would absolutely whoop Hope's ass in the 1v1, right? He'd be cranking 90s on her. But, Scott, you focus on a movie where Scott has to get in and steal, okay? And, once again, doesn't have to specifically be MODOK, right? I think it would be cool, but any villain that focuses on the individualities of Ant-Man being able to shrink and Ant-Man being Scott Lang, expert thief. Any villain that focuses on those things would work great. Once again, the best parts in this movie are the scenes that focus on that. Hell, the best fight scene in this movie is Ant-Man versus Falcon, because you get two characters with drastically different power sets, and the way they interact is super fun. The way these characters think is like just all like the way that fight scene isn't the best choreography. No. The Yellow Jacket versus Ant-Man is a really cool scene to watch, but it's just action figures fighting. But Ant-Man versus Falcon has a purpose, and once again, you focus on Scott being a really good thief. Does he beat Falcon? Kind of. He gets what he wanted, but he didn't like whip his ass, you know what I mean? Falcon was a better fighter. Falcon had better battle tactics. He had just never dealt with someone like Scott before, and Scott's a very tricky thinker. So he's able to get around the conflict in a way only he could have. If any other hero, if Hope had been in that situation, she would have just fought Falcon. And shit, would she have won? Maybe. I don't know. That would really depend on the writer. I think you could justify either one of them winning in that situation. That's a great fight scene, right? Have more shit like that. The heist to get into the cross industries, it couldn't be exactly the same, right? You'd have to change some stuff because they are going underground. But stuff like that, like figure it out. Or scratch what I said earlier about them knowing. Maybe not fully know that MODOK was a thing, right? Because you do have the end credit scene from Iron Man 3 in my version. So it wouldn't be a complete like, oh, what the fuck? But kind of get this idea that he's working with people on the down low, right? And then we figure out that it's AIM, and then it's like, oh shit, I need to get in there, right? So Scott has to fight MODOK. Scott's 1v1ing MODOK, right? And MODOK's terrifying. I don't know all of his powers. I know he's in a flying suit, a flying chair suit thing. He's a big head and he likes to make buzzsaws, right? I'm sure he has other gadgets and shit. But that's something Scott couldn't just like punch, right? So have a scene where Scott's like trying to run away, they're like underground, and MODOK's like, I'm gonna be the coolest, I'm gonna take over the world, or whatever the fuck MODOK does, right? And I said earlier that don't get rid of Darren Cross, right? Really, during the movie, hone in on Darren Cross's relationship with Hank, or old relationship with Hank, because I said Darren and Scott have no thematic parallels. And that's completely true, 100%. But you know who does have thematic parallels? Darren and Hope. For one, physically, they both have flying yellow suits that can shrink and shoot lasers, right? So there's the whole powers, same thing. But also, thematic-wise, they both were taken in under Hank's wing at a young age. One, well, because she's her daughter, and he was his protege. And they both became estranged. They both had hatred to Hank. Darren, because he wanted to be Hank, and then Hank pushed him away, which isn't really addressed. There's a line where Darren is like, "Why'd you push me away? I was your protege." And Hank was like, "Because you were too similar to me." Focus on that. We have no idea what the fuck that means in the movie, right? No idea. What the fuck is that referencing? But that's a really interesting idea. Focus in on that and have the theme be forgiveness and family importance, which is already a big theme in the movie. Hope learns to forgive her father for running away, or in her eyes, running away and leaving her alone after her mother died, when really Hank was like trying to find a way to bring his wife back. But really like focus in on that idea and then have them fight. Have this be a problem. Hope can fight him, right? And their fight is Darren being like, "Why are you helping him? Like he wasn't there for you. He wasn't there for us." And she's like, "No, he knew what he was doing. He was trying to help us." And Darren can't accept it, right? And they're fighting. That has a much more thematic impact. You have a cool fight where both of them flying, which could be interesting. And that way Hope is like a part of the movie, because she's not really a part of the first movie, and then she's like kind of the main character of the second, which I'm not going to get too much into the second movie. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's got cool shit in it. But I think that would be super cool. You could really hone in on that idea. Whereas Ant-Man is fighting MODOK, and that would help with one specific shot I really hate, which is a shot where Scott throws one of his red discs, his shrinking discs, at Yellow Jacket. Why does he fucking do that? They can both shrink. What the fuck's the point of shrinking a guy that can just grow when he wants to? You know what I mean? What the fuck's the point? You know what, that would be a cool scene? Where if you got MODOK monologuing, and then he shrunk him, and then it's like, oh shit, now you're on my level, and then he's got all his ants, right? And that's like a turning point in the fight. It doesn't mean Ant-Man's just winning now, right? But that's a turning point in the fight. You actually have a cool scene where Ant-Man is doing something he could only do, bringing a villain down to size and getting him out of his comfort zone. You don't remove any of his powers or anything, right? He's still dangerous, but you make it so that now he has to fight in an environment he's never fought in, a situation he's uncomfortable in. I'm assuming MODOK's a big fan of control. This could be the moment that like he's like, oh shit, and then you defeat MODOK, you defeat Darren. Darren can die. I don't really think he maybe should. MODOK shouldn't die. I think you, because I'm going to real quick shill Overly Sarcastic Productions. Great channel, go watch them. They're one of the main reasons I'm making this video. But one of the videos they've made is their Detailed Diatribe series, which is where they make longer videos about a specific subject, similar to what I'm doing, but they have like a pretty PowerPoint, whereas you just get my face and whatever music I have playing under this. What they have is a detailed diatribe called Superheroes in an Empty World, or something to that effect. It's a Superman quote. But in that video, they talk about a big issue with the MCU, not just the MCU, well, maybe for Red, because she hates the MCU, but the MCU has this problem where the heroes have nothing to do. There's no recurring villains, there's no consistent threat. It's just they deal with whatever the threat of the movie is, kill it, and then just sit on their asses until something else happens, right? And in this version of the movie that I'm thinking of, AIM is not destroyed. MODOK is put away, Darren is put away, maybe killed. Darren can die. It's not as important for him, but like he could still live because he could still be a recurring villain. But MODOK doesn't die. That's very important. AIM is still a problem, right? There's the end credits scene where the whole like funny like exposition moment with Luis, where he's like, I was talking to this girl, to this bomb chick, to this like, I love that. This movie's just funny, by the way. Overall, this movie's just funny. Luis is pretty fucking funny. Anyways, it ends with like, the Avengers, man, they called. And I'm like, that's like cool. Like, I fucking lost my shit when I was a kid and I watched it, but now it's like, oh, sick. He can join the Avengers to also do nothing, right? Because he doesn't even join the Avengers. You know what I mean? He's not in the next movies. But you know, it'd be cool if it's like, oh, like that guy you fought, like, they said that wasn't it. He's in other places, you know? And have that be how the movie ends, is that he's going around dealing with AIM. Iron Man 3 takes place 3 years before Ant-Man. That is plenty of time for MODOK to have gone away, rebuilt AIM, and to be a world-spanning threat. And so he's like, oh shit, I'm getting these leads, right? And Ant-Man and Hope are like, well, Scott and Hope are like, we're not done here. We got something we can do. And Cass can be like, are you a hero, daddy? And he can be like, yeah, I'm Ant-Man. And then you have the end credits with Ant-Man, right? That could be fucking sick, dude. And you give Ant-Man something to do. He's not in these movies because he's going around staking out, breaking into these fucking things, and beating up AIM soldiers, right? That's fire. You could put a little bit of that into the Wasp, but have a little bit of that in there of like, oh shit, we've been dealing with AIM soldiers, right? And it's like, oh, well, he's been on house arrest, so she's had to do it herself, and she's like, yo, what the fuck? Like, and that could lead to a better reason why their relationship's kind of like rocky, because it's like, you really risked the good we were doing to fucking go off and do something by yourself, dog, because Captain America told you? Because that's one part I don't like about that movie, is like that they reset the romance, but that's whatever. But yeah, I think these changes could make the movie way better. So how I'm gonna end this video is to rant about something else that I think this movie could have done very much better, and that the majority of the MCU also has this problem, and it's what I said at the beginning of this video, or at least at the beginning of the pros section of the things to copy, is that your story should not be able to be done with any other character. The story would have to be drastically different if another character was involved. And that includes the power set. And a lot of this movie does hinge on the way the powers work, but it hinges on them breaking their own rules. There is a quote by the great Brandon Sanderson, Brando Sando, legendary modern fantasy writer. And the quote is, limits are more important than powers. How do they describe Ant-Man's powers in the movie? Hank says that the suit works by shrinking the distance between atoms. You keep your mass when you're small. That's the idea, is that Scott is a 200-pound man that's this big. A lot of really cool things you can do with that. You know what you can't do with that? Run along with the barrel of someone's gun. Hide an ant. That's an issue. That's fucking annoying. That pulls me out of the movie. You know what I mean? And you might be saying, well, I mean, in the comics, he rides ants, but he also punches people hard, so obviously it's not a problem. In the comics, you know how his powers are explained? He can choose. When he wants to be the mass he is big, he can. When he wants to be light as an ant, he can. When he wants to be big, he can. When he wants to be bigger than he normally is, he can. He can choose his weight. He has complete control over his density and mass. Does that make a lot of scientific sense? Fucking no. Of course it doesn't make scientific sense. But it's a guy named fucking Ant-Man. It doesn't matter. You know what doesn't make sense? Fucking shrinking atoms and then shrinking smaller than a fucking atom. How does that fucking work, dog? What do you mean? God, shit, that shit pisses me off. It literally made me so mad that me and my brother like to braincraft this universe of our own cinematic universe with superheroes in it. And one of the characters I'm gonna make is literally gonna be Ant-Man's powers as stated in the movie, but I actually like focus on how he works, and he's gonna be like wearing like this big like suit of armor, not like as more like Ironmonger than Ant-Man, right? More like Ironmonger than Iron Man, I mean. It'll have like these jetpacks on it, and his whole thing is that he shrinks into like a 600-pound bullet and just fucking blasts through things, can't be stopped, kind of thing. But anyways, yeah, that shit just pissed me off. Like, the MCU has this problem if they really want to like ground their stories way too much. These are comic books, like they're kind of goofy, and that's fine, that's fun. You can take yourself to some degree seriously, but don't try and make the power set more feasible, because if you could make a feasible power set, you'd be making Ant-Man. You wouldn't be making Ant-Man the movie, you know what I mean? You don't need to convince me that your powers are possible. You need to convince me they make sense in your movie, and you failed to do that by trying to make it more sciencey and make more sense. Unnecessarily so. If you just said the suit allows you to control your mass density and size, fucking okay, right? And you don't have to have the whole thing about like if you don't have a certain protective suit, it'll fuck up your brain. That shit's trash. Don't make Darren go crazy like because of the suit, right? Especially because he hasn't worn it before. Have it be that his rage at Hank is like his inability to let go of the past, and MODOK is someone that maybe is that figure that he wanted, someone that is using him and being like, oh, you got this, you're so smart, kind of thing. Have that'd be way cooler. But yeah, that's about all I wanted to say. I really like Ant-Man. Overall, it's a well-made movie, good acting, good music, good shots, good CG, all that, but I think it really didn't capitalize on what a superhero story could be, what an Ant-Man story could be. And in the ways it didn't do enough. And I think the MCU could really learn from some parts of this movie and learn not to do what they do in all their movies. But yeah, if you've watched this far in my fucking stupid ass rant about a movie that came out in like 2015. I'm glad. There's fucking like, subscribe, all that bullshit. I have music on Spotify if you want to watch that. This is on my second channel, my main channel, Hugo the Giant, where I make music. Well, I try to make music. I never fucking make anything. But that's because I'm broke. But yeah, you know, subscribe if you want to see more Unhinged Rant videos. I also upload like my VODs here. Catch me on twitch.tv, Hugo the Giant 3. I don't stream regularly. I want to, but you know, it's just life, the rat race, all that shit. I really want to get into this better. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and get the fuck out of here. And another thing, the fucking keychain that he has as a tank, like how the fuck is he carrying that around? You know how much tanks weigh, dog? Like, them shits are like, they have to be thousands of pounds, right? And he's just carrying it around, and then he fucking drives it? It's had gas in it this whole time? Are you fucking stupid?